learning about settler colonialism. This is something that I wanted for us to cover in the open division for a long time, but I thought that it would be important that we cover some of the fundamentals of argument structure before we go into the settler colonialism critique proper. So I know that many of you weren't running critiques at this point because we are still learning about them, just the basics of it. But now that we've had a couple of conversations about critiques, and just generally structuring a speech, I think that we're ready to learn settler colonialism so that come this tournament this weekend, or even if you don't feel comfortable for it this weekend, perhaps for the city champion tournament in April, you'll be able to bring out your settler colonialism critique and really get things on about it. If you're a note taker like I am, I always try to give you a little bit of an order for your notes. So this is the things that we'll be going through, but as always, this will be recorded. So I would encourage you, because we got, I like for us to be a little bit more interactive. I feel like that makes the content a lot more helpful and that you would receive it a lot better than when I'm just talking at you. So what I would encourage for you is to take brief or light notes for this conversation today, and then revisit the video and see what else you might want to add in, because I want us to get into the habit of talking a little bit more, because it just helps you to remember the information better, but it also helps with me being able to see what you're thinking and how you're receiving things, to give more information where needed and less where it is not needed. So this is the order for the notes. So let's go ahead and get started. What is settler colonialism? So let's start by breaking it down. But first, I wanted to know if any of you know what colonialism is in general. What is colonialism?
Isn't it like when all of the Europeans came over to America and like tried to make houses and stuff there?
Yeah, that's an example. That is a great example of colonialism, the foundation of America. Does anybody have any other thoughts about what colonialism might be?
Yeah, adding on, it's like when someone takes over land that's already inhabited and they like decide to live there.
Yes. I like those things in combination with each other, especially. So I would define colonialism as, and again, remember, this is just something to build upon for your own definitions. You should create your own, something that if somebody asked you, hey, like if you were reading the settler colonialism critique and they ask you, what is settler colonialism? You should have your own written explanation ready to go. But just to give a definition of what colonialism is that I like the best, colonialism can be defined as the formal domination of one group of people by another group, typically by a foreign power. So I'll say that again. The colonialism can be defined as the formal domination of one group of people by another group, typically a foreign power. And there are 5 types of colonialism. We are focused on settler colonialism today, but the other 4 types of colonialism are exploitation colonialism, surrogate colonialism, internal colonialism, and plantation colonies, which is something that erupted in the Americas, like what Casey was getting at in her answer. So it's important to know the foundational understanding of colonialism before we start to define what settler colonialism is. So I will understand settler colonialism as the individuals who are native. So in that definition, it mentioned a foreign power. So it's typically the group that is governing as a settler is typically from somewhere else. So in America, the people who were the foreign power were the European settlers who were coming to the Americas. So Columbus and all of them, basically. So settler colonialism is when individuals native to where the foreign power is move to the land under colonial rule. So that is one of the biggest, the thing that distinguishes settler colonialism from all the other type of colonialism is that it's not just that they're affecting the land by like changing the customs and the culture of the people. They are affecting the land by their full-on presence and their domination in numbers. So they're not just coming 1 or 2 or 3, like in some of the other types of colonialism. They're coming in masses, you know, like they're coming there to live, which is pretty significant and has a grand effects on the people. So one of the things that I like to use to help teach settler colonialism is to reference the movie Pocahontas, which for all of its, you know, it has a lot of bad. The movie Pocahontas, the Disney Pocahontas has a lot of bad because it doesn't correctly portray the scenario, especially given the fact that Pocahontas was like a little girl when she met John Smith, and the historical understanding of Pocahontas and the Powhatan people, she was like 11 or 12, maybe 13 at most. She was not a grown woman like what we saw in the Pocahontas Disney movie. So how many of you have seen Pocahontas? Has everybody seen that?
And it's like super creepy when you learn about it because he's
Yeah.
super old.
Yeah, it's disgusting. It's like, what connected you to, you know? But yeah,
I don't know why it's really bad.
it's rough. It's rough. Have you seen Pocahontas, Casey?
Unfortunately.
Okay, so cool. What I wanted us to briefly look at was 2 different songs from the movie Pocahontas to help build on our understanding of settler colonialism a little bit more. And I wanted to talk about some of the lyrics. So the first one that I want us to watch is Colors of the Wind. Now, I like this. I love this song. I'm not gonna hold y'all up. The song is really fun. But what I like about it is that it kind of paints the perspective of the people who, and again, this is a very watered down version because this is a Disney movie. Oh, Raylene, let me add these people back into here. This is a very watered down version of the Pocahontas movie. Hi, Star. Welcome back, Raylene. Where we're at right now is we're just going over settler colonialism. You haven't missed too much, but we're gonna go ahead and keep going. Right now, we're about to listen to Pocahontas' "Colors of the Wind," and what I want you to be paying attention to, because it has the lyrics at the bottom of the screen, are examples of how colonialism might be a negative thing from the perspective of the people whose land is being taken from them. So like, look at the lines that we have Pocahontas saying and what are examples of the differences of cultures. After that, we're gonna watch another video from Pocahontas, the Savages song, that I think is a great side-by-side to portray the perspective of the people who are being colonized and the people who are doing the colonizing. So for this first video, to reiterate that, just jot down some things that you notice about how colonialism might be received, or how colonialism might have been negative or might be received negatively by the people who are indigenous to the land.
Referencing the nature and stuff like that, which I don't know if it's like very accurate.
The connectedness to the land is, yeah, no, that part is pretty accurate. It's like, it's not necessarily going into depths of like Pocahontas' specific tribe and their relationship to the land and what they practice. It does show that indigenous people had a connection to the land that European settlers did not share. So one thing that I really liked is that she was talking about, I like that one of the last lines where she said, you can own the earth and still all you'll own is earth. And she says, until you can pay with all the colors in, but their relationship to land is very different. She describes their relationship to the land as being one of ownership, as opposed to hers being one of like, just a connection, like an involvement in a greater chain of life. Because she feels more connected to it than she can tell that they do. Did anybody else notice that in different parts of the song?
Yeah.
What were some lines that stood out to you?
And they talked about like the wolves howling at the moon, like you'll never hear it.
Yeah, like animals get destroyed. So I think what I was asking you before was to kind of look into, hearing her perspective, how might colonialism have negatively impacted indigenous people? And so an example of that, it definitely could be like the the wolf not being
Yeah.
able to be heard.
They were literally taking their homeland from them, killing them, and destroying the land, and all because that they're a different skin color than them, spoke a different language, and didn't live the same way they did.
Yeah, exactly. And Pocahontas says it poetically in this song. It makes it light, but yeah, at this point, I don't think that like the movie is not trying to show because it's a kids movie. It's rated G, so they can't really show the rampant murdering of indigenous people over centuries. But yes, 100%, because these people look different, because these people behave differently towards the land, they were considered, something was wrong with them and that it didn't matter that they lived there. Which is a great segue into the second song. So this is the song. What's that, really?
So on the other song in the last part, he's like in the other song in the last part, that guy, John Smith, his hair was like a hat. Like I don't know why I just got distracted, but his hair in that last frame.
Yeah, I didn't notice that. It's definitely a little umbrella for her forehead as well that I didn't notice until right now. But
It looks like a toupee.
it does. It does.
Well, he
I have a
makes
lot
it
more
out.
questions. Why is his eyebrows brown? Like I never. Okay, there's a lot more.
Maybe he dyes his hair.
Back then, a lot of guys wore wigs, so
Fair enough. That's a good wig. I mean, except for this front part. It's not a move, but
That
to each
reminds
their
me
own.
of that particular frame reminds me of a certain former president. Like,
True. Toupee and all. Okay. So let's get to the second video about savages. Now, this is from the perspective of the people who are doing the colonizing. Now, what I want you to focus on is how they're describing the. All right, so that's a lot. What do we see from this video compared to the others? What do we learn about the perspective of the colonizer? All right, we're not watching.
Ursula.
What'd you say?
I was saying, oh my gosh, Ursula.
Yeah, Ursula's great, but we are not watching Ursula. I had a friend who did a Halloween costume as her. It was phenomenal. I'm gonna find a picture, but it was great. It was at a debate tournament in college too. But
really?
Yeah.
You can wear Halloween costume at debate tournaments?
Yeah, so like there was so slight tangent. The Harvard College debate tournament is typically it's no longer around. I think they eliminated the tournament about a year or two ago. But the Harvard debate tournament typically always fell on Halloween weekend. And so it was tradition to dress up. So teams would sometimes dress up together. Like one year, well, my school never did it together, but we had wanted to one year. We were gonna do gosh, I'm forgetting the show now. But yes, no, that was a tournament where people used to do it a lot, and it was really fun. It was cool to see people's costumes.
But so, are there any tournaments at all that fall on Halloween? That'd be so cool. Or any holidays at all? That'd be so cool.
I believe I think there is a tournament that replaced the Harvard tournament, but I am not 100% sure. I think I'm not sure for high school if that's what you meant though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that there might be, but that's something we can look into. But yeah, let's get back to the video. What did we see about from the perspective of the colonizer? What were some of the things that they were saying?
So they said like a bunch of bad things, and I was just like, wait, how did I not like hear all of the stuff they said before? And how it's the kids show?
Yeah.
They called them savages a bunch of times. Obviously, they called them filthy heathens, and I was just like, okay, no. I mean, I really don't understand how they're like. I know it's like this is a thing, but apparently, but I don't really understand how people can say that and not even feel anything about it.
Yeah.
Barely even human. Yeah, we all bleed. If we all live and die, we're all human.
Yeah. That's a philosopher that I like, or psychologist actually. Her name is Dr. Joy DeGruy. She writes she got famous for a book she wrote called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. and she was writing about the psychology of America after having chattel slavery and all this other stuff. And one of the things that I really liked is how she theorized about cognitive dissonance, which is basically when something that you know is when you when you basically try to make a rationalization in your mind for something that you know is true, and you try to tell yourself that it's not. So like one of the ways that people that colonize the Americas try to rationalize in their minds the destruction of indigenous people in their lands is by saying they're barely even human. They're subhuman. They're not really human. And it wasn't just that they were saying it like, you know, like regular, like how they said it in here. Like it also became a formal system. So in anthropology and in other forms of science and medical research, there was classifications of humanity so that they could actually believe that these people were less human than them just because of their race, which is crazy, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I did not realize like in the movie because in the movie the other side too was saying that the white people were barely even human as well. I was like, wait, they said that?
Yeah. So that's one thing that I had noticed about this clip as well that I didn't like as much, because what I had noticed from this video is that it tried to portray the indigenous people as being on an equal level of footing as the colonizers. And so, you know, the difference between the two is that the indigenous people are responding to the fact that someone is taking their land, as
And
opposed to the colonizers who are just acting as an aggressor.
the colonizers had guns too, so
Yeah. Guns
Yeah,
versus spears.
that really bothers me because it's not their fault. It's the colonizers. And also, I'm looking at the movie, and like the directors are two like old white guys, and so are most of the producers. So I think like that might explain some of how it
That
works.
explains some of it.
I feel like some parts of this movie are inaccurate.
Hmm.
Like, yeah. And
Yeah.
there are
It
actually, because of the recent, like, All Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter movement, there have actually been a lot of movies on Disney that have been, like, taken down or put a notice on them saying, when this movie was created, it was created under, like, I don't know, not, they don't say racism, they say something else, but basically that's what they're saying. And they say anything that's, like, culturally inaccurate, we apologize for.
that's on Disney Plus.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah.
I clicked on like an Aladdin movie, like not like yeah, I clicked on some Aladdin cartoon, and they said some cultures here were portrayed inaccurately.
Wow, Disney. That
And
sucks.
they said
Question.
I saw a picture of that notice, and I think it's actually like really good of them to do that, because they also mentioned about how instead of just removing them and not really talking about it, they're trying to create more conversations about it
Mm.
so that people can like
Because
discuss
people are gonna
like
watch it.
yeah, people are
Yeah.
gonna watch it, right? And like they put it also like in front of Peter Pan, which also has like a really horrible depiction of Native Americans.
Really? I don't think I've seen Peter Pan, or I haven't seen it in like a billion years.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's insane. Like
We're
first of all,
old,
like
so that makes
their
sense.
their skin is painted like a bright red.
Ooh.
Like if you think of the
Oh.
color red, that's
Yeah.
the color of a Native American skin in the movie. And they like I can't even like explain it. It just makes me so uncomfortable.
It's
They have
terrible.
But like
song and they're singing about like the Redskins. I remember it now.
Yeah.
It's so bad, but it's really bad.
And just think about how like American kids consume these medias, given what we've done to indigenous Americans in this country. Like just blanketly consume, or like, watching Peter Pan, just trying to see Tinkerbell, just kicking it, or watching Pocahontas, there's so many different depictions of indigenous Americans that are similar to what you described that was in Peter Pan, that are like go way across the span of history from like the early 19th, as long as we've had pencils and pens, there has been racist depictions of indigenous Americans and Africans in this country it's pretty sad given what has happened to these people. So yeah, I love the conversation that we had surrounding these videos, and I hope that it was good interactive stuff, because I wanted us to be able to look at these two side by side, to be able to give more visuals to what settler colonialism as a concept really looks like. So I would encourage you, and just like to revisit specifically the Savages videos again, and to watch how people are interacting with each other. What is the notion they are about to fight, and who's probably going to win in a battle between spears and guns? Thinking through just those times will help to build the image of how this land was cleared, and what really happened at the foundation of this country. But let's go back to the presentation now. All right. All right. So we've learned a little bit more about what settler colonialism is. We've seen some videos that have shown us exactly, or not exactly, that was way too loose. We've seen some videos that have shown us some for reference what settler colonialism looked like in the early stages of America. And so I want us to go a little bit deeper into why settler colonialism is a strategic argument for this year. So what we know about the settler colonialism critique is that it basically links, and by links, we all know what I mean when I say links, right? Like it links to, okay, great. Yes, I see Jay put a thumbs up. Everybody knows what I'm saying when I said links.
Yeah.
All right. Does anybody not know? Star, you good?
Yeah, I understand.
All right. So settler colonialism links to literally every affirmative on the topic. Why is that useful? You want an argument that links to every argument or every affirmative on the topic, because it can be used as a generic. So think of a generic negative argument as like socks. So when you're getting dressed, and you need, or your undergarments in general, like your basic things that you need to be able to get your day started. Your generic off-case arguments are things that you're going to be able to use every time, which helps with your preparation. Sometimes you'll read an argument, like if you're reading the HSI counterplan, the HSI counterplan only applies to the abolish ICE affirmative. You couldn't read the HSI counterplan against an affirmative that was about forensic science. You couldn't read the HSI counterplan about an affirmative that was related to policing and sentencing. You would only be able to read that counterplan against the immigration AF, or the ICE, well, I guess that is immigration, the ICE AF, because it is only relevant to that affirmative. So a generic argument is an argument that is relevant to all arguments or all affirmatives on the topic. Settler colonialism is a great generic because it is about the land. And so everything that is related to America is about the land. So if you have an abolish ICE affirmative, the settler colonialism critique, it links. If you have about, or something about body cams, if the body cams affirmative, the settler colonialism critique links. And it links because every part of the criminal justice system is connected to the foundation of this country, because we are still on the land that was stolen from indigenous people. Settler colonialism is not a process that has stopped. I don't know if everybody is aware of that, but just because it began a long time ago doesn't mean it has ended, because we are all a part of, like, because we're all a part of, like, this new America, very different than what it looked like, 300, 400 years ago. We are a part of the settler colonialist state. Now we have different relationships to it. Like most of us, most of us didn't just come off of a boat, right, this year, or off of a plane, or from some other country. So we're not new settling into America. So it kind of feels different than what we saw in the Pocahontas movies, because those were people who had just left their country and came to America because it's the foundation of colonialism in America. However, all of us as individuals are still implicated in settler colonialism because we live on land that is stolen. And one thing that I always think is really strategic about teams who read the settler colonialism critique is to learn about what indigenous people were from the area that you are living in. So what indigenous people might have lived in San Francisco or Oakland or some other part if you're not living in either one of those cities. That was something that I remember, like, a lot of the teams that read the settler colonialism critique in high school and college did, that I thought was really wise, because the way that you kind of give some honor or reverence to those people and their specific histories is by recognizing them in the debate round, like recognizing that the people, like the specific people who the land was stolen on, where we were debating typically. But since things are virtual, I think it's just helpful to learn about the indigenous people who are from the area where you are currently living on, the land that you are currently living on, and finding a way to incorporate that into your argument. But the grand sum of why I would strongly encourage you to consider reading the settler colonialism critique this year, and honestly, I think that it's a pretty helpful argument for most debate resolutions, because there's always a part of the resolution that says the United States federal government. And because the United States federal government is based in America, it is then again connected to the land. So there is a way to find a link to the affirmative. So let's talk about what that might look like. So just spitballing with you all real quick, what are some ways in which you might think that settler colonialism could link to the abolished ICE affirmative? Like, how would you explain that?
Because the app's impact is white supremacy and settler colonialism. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Yeah, I don't really know how to say this.
It sounds like, just talk it out. It sounds like you're going somewhere. The app's impact is white supremacy. So what would be your link here? Is it that it's not resolved, or what?
That we cannot resolve the issue until we actually talk about settler colonialism, because it was so horrible when it happened, but because we've all adjusted to living here, and we live here. We haven't thought about it, but when the first colonizers first came here, like, not the first colonizers, well, yeah, I don't know. Colonizers, the European colonizers, when they came here, they did such horrible things to Indians and the Native Americans that were here.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. I would say that one thing that I would add to that is just a couple of debate technical language. And so
Yeah, like what do they call it again? Something words.
I'm sorry?
They're called something words. What are they called?
Like buzzwords?
Buzzwords, yeah, debate buzzwords.
Yeah, so yeah, I would prefer probably so buzzwords is kind of used when people are using debate words without explanation. It's kind of like a negative way to talk about using debate language. But when I'm saying like just a technical term, I mean just like something that people are familiar with, that identifies that argument, but you have to still explain it out. And a lot of times when people say a buzzword, it's just like, it's a buzzword is supposed to just catch your eye, but it doesn't really have any merit behind it. That's used in like a negative sense. But so one thing that I would add to that explanation that Raylene was saying to us before is that is a root cause. Like you're claiming that the root cause of white supremacy is settler colonialism. And so what the affirmative would be doing is addressing just a symptom. So it's just like if you have like allergies and you're like, oh my God, my eyes, they're puffy. Ah, my sinus, it's terrible. What's going on here? And instead of doing something to address the allergy, you just address the symptoms. So you say, okay, my eyes are really puffy, I'm gonna get an ice pack, I'm gonna put it like one of those ones that has the eye holes, not just like a regular big eye, like stick ice, like one of the ice packs for your face to address your puffy eyes. And then you get a neti pot for your nose to address the sinus issues.
What is that? What is that?
Oh, you know, a neti pot? You don't know what that is?
No.
It's like a little, okay. All right. Tangent queen. So it's like a little thing that you squirt in your nose to help clear out your sinuses. So it's like a saline spray, I believe. I haven't used it. I have a friend who, I remember she used to use it a lot because she had sinus issues. But you squirt it in your nose. It's basically to just address the sinus issues. So for this example, yeah, neti pot, just the thing to squirt in your nose addresses symptoms. But the issue is the fact that you have allergies, and so you need to figure out how to address the allergy, which is the overall problem that is causing the symptoms, because the symptoms are just things that you have to just like, you got to keep chasing after that. But if you address the allergy, the thing that's causing the symptoms, then everything can get resolved. So in a world in which white supremacy is like what you're trying to address, that's just a symptom of settler colonialism, because the foundations of inequity in this country are based in the settling on this land that was occupied by indigenous Americans. So that is like the biggest argument of settler colonialism, and how it can be contextualized to the abolish ICE affirmative specifically, because that's the one that we'll be seeing at the, during the tournament this weekend for Baudl tournaments. Is pretty much just the abolish ICE AF until you make it to varsity, when people can read more things. So I would encourage you to find ways to strengthen an explanation of a link story that is similar to that makes it clear that addressing the root cause is better than addressing the symptoms, because all of the reasons why the criminal justice system are flawed are somewhat connected to the idea that this land itself was taken in a really illegal or unethical way.
I think I get it now. So basically, because of settler colonialism, because we haven't addressed the fact that what we did when we first came here was bad. Other things have stemmed from that, and ICE is one of them. Because of this, we think it's okay to put people in cages,
Yep.
And
Savages, barely even human, right?
Yeah, we like, people think it's okay to dehumanize people and tear apart families, which is what we did when we first came here, and it's still going on. So until we address this issue, it's not gonna we cannot abolish ICE, because it's just gonna stay. The mindset itself, white supremacy, it's gonna stay.
Right. That's awesome. The explanation was really, really good. And I hope that everybody is like, it's checking in too. Like I want to hear from other folks as well. I love the explanation that we got from Raylene, and I'd love to hear some other thoughts about what you're thinking about settler colonialism so far.
I have one.
Okay.
Basically, like what I seen from it was decolonization, because of how the next, I think the second neg talks about how like decolonization, how settlers basically decolonize indigenous people and try to enter them into civil society, which means like whitewashing them with residency and stuff. And this is like abolishing ICE is doing the same thing and trying to whitewash immigrants, to say that like trying to, I don't know how to explain this, but try to like whitewash them or enter them into civil society.
So part of what I'm hearing from that explanation, because I like that a lot, is a connection from the past to the present, because I think that will be useful the most for settler colonialism. So what I'm hearing from you, Star, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that why settler colonialism is a relevant argument is because sit against the abolish ICE affirmative is that people who are foreigners are, and or at least this is how I was getting it. People who are foreigners are being excluded from citizenship in the same way that they were when we started to settle here in the first place. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like, because it helps the judge to be able to see your root cause claim when you're able to make those kind of parallels. Because that's exactly right. Like that when we were founding this country, we weren't like, all right, it's not just that we're stealing the land. You also don't get to be a part of our new thing that we're building. Like we are building this new country and you're not included. Like just no. You don't get citizenship into the new country that we are building on your land. And that's pretty significant because we start to see how citizenship gets crafted and like foundationally in this country. And that has a large significance into how people are talking about it now. Because how many of you have heard of the concept of nativism?
I did.
So what does nativism mean?
Nativism really means like people. Well, they weren't really native to the continent and stuff, but they're people that like are xenophobic to people from other countries, particularly like white Americans and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like that, the people who are like, yeah, no, this is our country. This is ours. This is ours, y'all. Like this is ours.
Isn't that just called racism?
Well, nativism, it is racist. A lot of it is embedded within racism, but it is not like, it doesn't have to be racist. So like a lot of Black folks and other people of color who were born here and have lived in America for generations can be nativist. And it's not just racism, right? Like it's grounded in the fact that like we believe that we have ties to this land and that other people who are not from this land have no ties to this land. Like basically whole lot of gang stuff. Not everybody can be here. You can't sit with us, quite literally. And so nativism got its start when we became like a settler colonialist society, and it's continued into how we talk about citizenship today, right? So like this is kind of like how I'm like connecting the explanation that Raylene gave to the one that Star gave, and the important key term here that I want to be included in your notes is nativism. Because how we talk about citizenship is reflective of a nativism that is embedded in settler colonialism. Because like Star was mentioning, the people who are claiming to be native to this land are not people who are literally indigenous to America. Their indigeneity or their connection to this land is based off of settler colonialism. Now there are some caveats. I'll get to that a little bit later. But let's just go ahead and move on because I want to make sure that we get out on time. So what are some ways that you could best utilize the settler colonialism critique from Baudl? So I am going to share let me stop sharing real quick. I'm going to share to the Baudl settler colonialism critique because I want us to look it over, and I want to be able to make sure that I answer questions that we might have and to talk about ways that I think that you might be able to use the packet efficiently. Doc. All right. Can you all see this?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right. So the Baudl settler colonialism critique. So the Baudl settler colonialism critique is okay. It is only okay. I'm not going to hold you up. We have to produce evidence at the beginning of the year, and this is like technically not a part of our it takes a long time to produce evidence. So the packing of stuff that we send out to you all are a little bit skinny in terms of content, but I think that there's still ways to make it useful for you. So we've gone over a lot of the general understandings about what colonialism is, what settler colonialism is, some ways to understand it, and ways to connect it back to the immigration affirmative or the abolish ICE affirmative. Things that I think that are a little bit tricky about this critique that you might want to spend some time working through before the tournament, if you're planning on reading it this weekend, is the alternative. So we were talking about the link level, which is a really, really important part of the critique, but all parts of the critique are important. So the link, the impact, and the alternative are all equally important, especially in your earlier parts of your careers. And so the alternative for the settler colonialism, I don't know why I'm smacking my fist. The alternative for this critique is to burn down the state. And so what I would encourage you to do to make the best use of the settler colonialist critique is to find a way to explain what, like, looking through the Catherine Kelly Abram card and finding an explanation of what that looks like. Because what will hurt you when you're reading a critique is when your alternative is really vague. So you might have a really, really strong explanation of the link. So like how we were just, those explanations that we got from Star and Raylene about, how, the explanation that we're going to about root cause and all that business, all of that is great stuff. What gets people behind in the debate when they're reading a critique and when you are not having a very strong debate on the alternative level. Why? Because it will be susceptible to a permutation, because the app will make a permutation against your alternative, and you need to have an explanation of why the alternative cannot happen at the same time or in connection to the affirmative. And so one of the things that is important about understanding burning down the state is that if that's true, that means that ICE automatically would be going away, which means that this is an example of a plan inclusive alternative, which is, have y'all heard of a plan inclusive counterplan before?
No.
Okay, no worries. A plan inclusive counterplan, or also known as a PIC, not to be confused with a picture. A PIC is just a counterplan that includes all or part of the plan. Now, people might read, sometimes people read, what's up?
So is the alternative saying that we should burn down the state, and because we're burning down the state, we're technically also abolishing ICE? So
Yes.
vote for us because we solved two things.
You saw one thing, because remember, you're making a root cause argument, but you're saying that in solving this, you solve that. You do solve that because it is a root cause claim. Because you're getting rid of the whole state, which is the problem. The state is a reason why we're having all these symptoms. There cannot be an ICE without the state.
Yeah,
does somebody have a question?
Where people live.
Yeah, that's something that you would have to think through. So I think that, like, I would read into the warrants of this card, and I would want to find out exactly what I would need to defend. So you have a couple of options when you're reading this alternative. You can be A, operating in the world of fiat, or B, operating in about like the particularities of our education. Because those are the two main ways. Well, I guess I choose these two fingers. Those are the two main ways that an alternative really can compete with the affirmative. So if it's about the fiat adverse, like, implications of the alternative, then you would really need to think about like the logistics, like where are people going to live? What is the process going to be for giving people their land back? What does it mean to burn down the state? To like, what does that look like? And this card is pretty, explicit. And so it has some suggestions about what that looks like. And I want to make sure that you all know that I am 100% open to helping you understand any of these cards. And I know that, like, it might be a little daunting to look at some of the language in this stuff, but everything that we've been saying on this call today is a derivative of the things that are in this file. Like, I'm just breaking it down into more common, regular speak. And so if you ever look through this file and you feel like you're a little bit stumped, make sure that you shoot me an email, Slack me, asking whatever question that you have so I can be able to help you work through this. So, like I was saying, if you're going to read this alternative, if you're operating through fiat, then you need to think about the logistics of what this looks like. If you're not operating through fiat and you're saying that this alternative is just about the education that we receive from this round, then I would say, then you don't really have to, but I would probably want to, honestly, I would probably want to change the alternative. If you didn't want it to be about the fiat, about the world of fiat, this card is pretty specific in saying that like the state actually needs to be burnt down. So it will be hard to spin this to say this is just about the education and the debate, saying that, yeah, we should be on the stance against the state for ethical reasons. Did somebody have a question? I thought I heard something.
So a lot of people don't like fiat. Like I like when people ask me some stuff, and I'm like, I didn't have to respond to that because as a debater, fiat means that we are operating under the assumption this has already passed.
So fiat just basically is the imaginary world, like that we're all like of simulation. So it's not just about the plan passing or not. It's about us pretending to be not just debaters in a room. It's something more than that. It's like we're role playing as activists or as the federal government. Like the affirmative, usually when they're reading a plan text, they are pretending that the plan has been passed and that they're defending this. And as a negative, sometimes when you're reading your critique, you might be pretending role playing as just an activist, something like that. Like when you're reading the settler colonialism critique or something else that is similarly motivated. But fiat, you don't have to have fiat. You don't have to operate in the world.
Not to answer certain questions.
It makes it easier to not answer some questions, but it also means that you have to answer a lot more. So like with this alternative, you have to answer those questions like that were being posed earlier of like, so where would people live if we got rid of the state? Because we understand that settler colonialism is a terrible practice. What does that mean then for how our society would operate? What would that mean for laws? What would that mean for lawlessness? What would the process be for giving people land back? Where would we move the people who have lived here all their lives? Like, what would we do? Those are the kind of questions that have to get answered with fiat too.
So we could start from like the bottom up, like we did before. Can we say that we will start from the bottom up, like we did before?
You can say whatever you want to say. I just encourage you to, like, if you're going to read the settler colonialism critique, the thing that I wanted to emphasize in this conversation today is that the alternative has to be a significant part of the debate. So however you want to explain the alternative is entirely up to you. And I think you can definitely say that you want to start from the bottom up. I would encourage you to look up de-development. I'll type that. It's just development with DE in front of it, de-development, which is a concept that people kind of talk about that is similar to what you're saying. And it might be helpful in you getting some research on that. So another thing is that in this packet that I want y'all to look at is framework. So we haven't talked a ton about framework in the open division yet, but I want us to get more into this. So that might be something that we do for next week. But I also want you to encourage you to use the Baudl YouTube page as a resource, because I know that there's already a framework lecture that was put up by Miss Jasmine for the SLC group. So just as a FYI, like we do this every week, to be able to have like an interactive session with everybody and to be able to, build community, vibe out, ask some questions as they come. But there's also the Baudl YouTube page that can be a really good resource to, fill in some of the gaps that you may notice that you have as you're building onto your, argument arsenal. Framework will be important because you will often have to defend like why your critique gets to exist in debate, which is kind of unfair, because people will read an argument saying that critiques are bad for debate or they're unfair or that you don't get to have an alternative. The framework that is in here is really just a basis. I would encourage you to look through this and to rewrite things in your own words and to add whatever you think is best. Because again, this critique is skinny. It has the bare minimum of what you would need to run a settler colonialism critique. What will be most successful, what will aid you the most to encourage you to be the most successful in reading this critique will be to develop your own explanations for things past what is in the packet. So rewriting the tags, doing some better highlighting, because obviously it's not highlighting when you received it, but definitely retagging things and working on your link explanations ahead of the round will take you bounds ahead of your opponent. So it's only a few people here. We've done a lot of top conversation about what settler colonialism looks like. And so I know that you all have the capacity to build some really amazing link stories in your debates. So what I want you to work on doing, and not in this right now moment, but if you're planning to run this critique, I would strongly encourage you to create a link explanation for the 2&T or the 1NR, whatever position that you're in, that talks about in depth how the abolish ICE affirmative links to settler colonialism critique. And I would encourage you to start from the very beginning. So like some of the foundational understandings about what settler colonialism is, and then bringing it back to abolish ICE so that the judge and your opponents, honestly, are able to understand why it is that addressing settler colonialism is a necessary prerequisite to being able to solve for the problem of ICE and immigration in this country. So let me new share, go back here. All right, lastly, couple of resources. So in case that you're interested in going further and learning about settler colonialism, I wanted to provide you with like 3 different types of resources depending on what it is that you're interested in. So the first one is a kind of hard text. And there's the PDF is available online. I will copy and paste. I will honestly, I think I will just send a link to all 3. I'll put this in our open division Slack channel with a link to all of these different resources because they're different and they're like I wanted something that would fit everybody's lifestyle. So this text is a little bit more difficult. It's a dissertation, but it is really helpful in building your understanding about settler colonialism in this country because she goes like all around the entire colonial landscape. Like her work is about understanding the impact of settler colonialism, and she theorizes it through Black female bodies because she explores a way in which the land was cleared through slaves. So like the people who were forced to, manipulate the land from its original state. Because remember, when people came to, I guess, actually, I didn't mention this before because we can only do so much in these, couple hour sessions. But a part of settler colonialism in this country specifically, it wasn't just that the European settlers came here, shot up some Indians and said, America, like it wasn't that. European settler came, shot up some Indians, but they also brought with them tons of people from Africa, to be enslaved in the Americas. And what this author does is she explains kind of the connection between slavery and settler colonialism and how reproduction of slaves, literally having more slaves was a part of how this country was built. So clearing out of the land, clearing out the people who are indigenous to this country, as well as the slaves who were, brought here to manipulate the land. So the crop and building the buildings and clearing out the forests and things like that. The manual labor was done by the people who were enslaved Africans. And so she does that and explains the connection between those 2 things. Now, like I said, that's the most complicated reading on here. I put it first because, I don't know, I think it's really important and really helpful. And so what I would encourage you to do if you are interested in reading this is to read it in sections. It's incredibly long. There are some sections that will be less helpful than others. So be judicious in what sections you decide to read, because it is likely that you would not read all of this at once. I did not read all of this at once. And I'm old, and I like this kind of stuff. The second one is something that I think might be a little bit more helpful. It's called Settler Colonialism and Genocide Policies in North America. Now, this is a YouTube lecture. I love YouTube lectures. They're really, really good for when you want to learn information, but you also have other stuff to do. You might have to do the dishes. You might have to paint your toenails. You might need to take the dog on a walk. All of that you can do while you're listening to a YouTube lecture. Throw some like your AirPods in or whatever, earphones, or maybe none at all. And just listen to it talk out. It's a really well put together explanation. I think it's about an hour long, about settler colonialism, so that you can have some more historical context that you can build into your link story, that you will be working on if you're reading this critique. The third and the last one that I'm suggesting, If Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. Now, this book is, you will likely have to read it if you're in AP English or some other English course sometimes. This is a common book that you would read in high school. But even if you don't, because I was encouraging, because you'll get a head start on it. But even if you don't read it in school, it's a really good book that is about the start of colonialism in Africa. Now, this was a different type of colonialism, insofar as it wasn't full-on settler colonialism that we saw in the Americas, where a group of people came there and moved there in mass. It was a different, one of the other types of colonialism that I mentioned that there exists. It was exploitation colonialism. But the reason why I included it on the resources list is because I like it because it tells colonialism from the perspective of the indigenous without the, crap that we saw in that Disney Pocahontas movie. It shows like the full perspective of people that were untouched by the other parts of the world, and then shows how that community changes over time in a way that I think will be significant for you to be able to imagine what happened in the Americas.
So the book has no bias.
You said what?
So the book has no bias, basically.
It does. It honestly, it doesn't have any big bias to me. Like, I think that the only bias that I can refer to in that book, because I really like it, I read it a couple times now, is that, like, it's just a focus on a lot of male characters. And so we see there are women characters, and there are significant women characters, and they do show some ways in which gender roles existed. But I think that one thing that was a bit biased in the storytelling was that it did not go into the intimacies of any of the women in the book. It just kind of showed them in as like they were there and they were developed, but they weren't 3-dimensional. They were like 2-dimensional. You guys, have you guys seen Jimmy Neutron? Y'all know that show, the cartoon? Y'all remember that? Yeah, no. Jimmy Neutron. They were bulgy, 3D. That's like the men character. And then like the women characters were 2D, like think Fairly Odd Parents, where it's just like, no, it's not bulgy. It's just, we see you there, but it's not as defined and rounded.
Yeah, the book is told from like a kind of sexist man's perspective, so you don't really see the woman. But
yeah, Okonkwo is a character. He's something else. But I did like how he talked about. I liked some of the things that he felt about his daughter, like how he really respected her. But obviously it portrayed his sexism because he wished she was a boy.
Yeah, that was.
Did somebody say something?
Well, I was just gonna say that I don't understand why in anywhere in the world why people think women are lesser than, and I just want to tell these people, like, if it wasn't for women, you wouldn't be alive. So.
Yeah. And honestly, it's in almost every society. It's a result of civilization. Hunter and gathering societies is crazy. but it's always really interesting to me about how women are put down is that of animals, like humans have one of the lower sexual dimorphism, meaning like the physical differences between men and women are on the lower side for humans. So it's really ironic to me how we treat women, given the fact that men and women are honestly biologically not as different as other mammals, especially. Like, yeah, it's
Women's
crazy.
like women's brains develop faster. We are less quick to act on our decisions because we actually think about them. Like it's really, I don't know. It's like I just don't think it's intelligent that this is even a thing. Like it's still a thing, which is why I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's a part of colonialism too. Cause I can remembering Pocahontas. Like there's this story, it is an absurd story that is clearly connected to sexism, and just general misogyny, because like it is not okay that we are romanticizing um you know child rape, which is functionally what that story is intending to do, because she was a girl, and a part of her, like the background of this is that you know colonialism was happening at the very same time that this effed up love story is happening. So there's a strong connection between gender violence and colonialism, and specifically in this country, settler colonialism. So I like these conversations that are happening. Now, I would encourage you to also do some of your own Google researches and things like that. I think I might have mentioned this. Oh no, I was talking to someone else. If you ever start doing some Google research and you find that there is an article or a book that you have not been able to access because you need to have like sometimes with websites like TNF Online or LexisNexis or just other kind of research websites, and don't mind the dog, other research websites, you might need to have access to an article through an institution like a college or your job. Obviously, you all are not in college, and I'm sure that you don't have the kind of job that would give you that connection. Me or Miss Jasmine can help you get access to whatever it is that you might need to aid you in your research. So do not shy away from finding your own resources. These three were just here to be as a reference point to help get you started. All right. So that's all that I have for you all today.